Welcome back. I am Danielle McCormick. I'm the co-founder of Suite Solutions and your co-host here on SuiteSpark podcast.
And hello, I am Stephanie Georgakopoulos, the other co-host and co-owner. We are very excited to be with you guys today. I know the last couple of times I talked a lot, but now it's Danielle's turn to shine. So she's going to be going over her area of expertise in this episode. We've talked a lot of math so far. We found out our financial independence number, where we're headed. We talked about some tax strategies that kind of help us get there. But now is a little bit more, if you've been listening to the episode, you're like, what do I do? Maybe you're concerned, I'm underperforming and I don't even know if I'm on the right path. I just wanted to start the questioning off with, because I think that it's a huge question in people's mind, is like, are they even like in the right spots? Danielle, what are the margins that you would say indicate whether or not somebody is underperforming? Let's just start there.
Sure. If your margins, your walkaway, EBITDA, cash, I know we said we would go into EBITDA a little bit more when we come back to reading your financials, which will be probably next week or two. So if your margins are less than 20%, you are really cutting it close. It makes it very difficult for you to be able to pay out any kind of bonuses. It makes it difficult for you to take on additional inventory or new inventory. And it can make it very difficult for you to really just have any of those expansion plans. And it puts you in a fight against inflation and all of that kind of thing. If your business hasn't either raised its prices or because of cost containment issues, your margins are slowly being eroded away, that is definitely a sign of an unhealthy business from a financial perspective. And usually that would stem from, again, either your pricing not changing with the market or cost containment issues within your operation and inefficiencies overall.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you're listening and, you are underneath that 20% underperforming, continue listening because we are going to give you great nuggets. And even if you are in that area and just want to, improve, again, continue listening. We're going to give you great nuggets. Tell me, you had mentioned that you have 4 or 5 things that you look at when you first go in. Can you walk us through what those are and then tell us what people need to be thinking about as they're addressing their own business?
Absolutely. So there are a lot of things that I look at when I come into a business. And again, like Stephanie said, if you're listening and you're like, I want to go down this road, I'm trying to eventually sell. I know that I want this to be part of my retirement plan, but whoa, Nelly, not only am I barely hanging on with my fingernails right now, but how is it that I'm ever going to get to that scalable number? How is it that I'm ever going to get here to the goals that I need for my financial independence number? Even if I put all of Stephanie's tax strategies in place, what the heck am I supposed to do with this? And how do I actually make this workable for a sale and for my financial future? And a lot of folks, you got to start with, what is it? Make your own bed and you can rule the world. You have to come in and really look at your own business and really look at what your operation is doing, how you're running things, how your employees are responding to you, and overall the culture that you've set up. So I'm going to go into each of these I'm not too in depth, but we'll walk through each of these. Some of the things that I first look at, again, like I just said, are going to be your prices. I'm going to look at your prices, see where you are in terms of the marketplace. What are you charging for? What are you not charging for? And do you have any contracts that are just really either underperforming or not advantageous for you? So there's several places where you can be bleeding money from the top of your balance sheet there as far as what you're not bringing in revenue. And next week, we're really going to dive into hidden revenue and maximizing what you have without making it feel gross to your customers or making it feel gross to yourself. So we'll get into all that in terms of if you're like, yeah, I have a pricing issue, there will definitely be an episode coming for you there. But that's definitely the first thing I look at. The second thing I look at is actually I just watch. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, it's hard to understand what to price your stuff at. It's hard to feel like, what am I in the marketplace? What am I not? And a lot of folks tend to go with, what would I pay for this service? Rather than what is the value associated with this service,
Mm.
and how do I stack up against my competitors? And we could go in for days and days on imposter syndrome and where am I? Am I an expert? And we'll definitely probably make some space for that in future episodes.
Yeah.
But key being, most of the time we see people that underprice themselves because they're going by the bargain that they would want to get, and then they're unhappy with their margins. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
What's your
So
cup say?
then the next thing I do is I honestly just watch. Oh, my cup. It says you're killing me, Smalls. My best friend made it. And then my son used to have a sippy cup that said Smalls on it.
Yeah,
It was a pair.
love it.
Yeah, but this is also my cup that I go into businesses with, and I'm like, you're killing me, Smalls, because what are we doing here? But no, I'm kidding. Absolutely no judgment when it comes to this, because again, like we stated last time, most people are the best at whatever they've done. And that doesn't mean you're a math major. That doesn't make that you are the very top MBA student. And actually, having an MBA doesn't teach you jack shit about running a business, but that's neither here nor there. There's definitely no shame in the game in terms of not necessarily knowing these things, or as I talk through these hot spots, you're like, oh, that's me. Oh, that's me too. All things are fixable. All things are figure outable. I don't think you can see it, but I have a little sign that says that on my desk. But when it comes to, like I said, the owner's mindset and your overall pricing, and I'll come back to owner's mindset here in a little bit when we talk about your employees, but really looking at the culture. What is the culture that you're setting? And a lot of it does reflect on the owner themselves. Do you have a staff that's wishy-washy? Do you have a staff that doesn't necessarily follow through on implied tasks? Do you have a staff that is waiting around and hoping that they're going to be told what to do? Those kinds of things really play into the culture and impact your business a whole lot more than you may think it does. And so I'm going to talk a lot about owner's mindset, because what we've been told is if you have high expectations or voiced expectations at all, then that makes you a jerk. That makes you a micromanager. That makes you blah, blah, blah. Insert bad term here, right? So most people are like, I worked for a shitty boss. I don't want to be a shitty boss. So I'm going to make sure that my employees feel happy and blah, 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 and all Care Bears and shit, right? And that doesn't actually breed a good environment at all for our businesses. That doesn't breed a good home. Again, you've probably seen a million people on various podcasts and whatnot that say the second you start referring to your culture and your people as family, that because families love each other through everything, thick, thin, and dysfunctional.
That's
Whereas
the word I thought of,
people
dysfunctional.
that are in high performing teams actually hold each other. Yeah, dysfunctional. For the D, we put the fun and dysfunctional. That's not going to help get where you want to go, right? Looking at how the owner has set things up, how are you feeling as that owner? How have you run the business to date? Has it been trying to be the nicest place on earth? That kind of stuff. I have seen nice cultures, and that's actually the number one hot spot that I look for when I'm just looking at culture. Is this an overly nice or fake culture? Because people, just like a marriage, just like anything else, if you are unwilling to have those 10,000 fights that you need to have over the money, over the metrics, over the processing, over the standards that we hold, you're going to run your business into the ground. And it is like watching, and I think I've shared this with you before, Stephanie, it is like watching a train crash in slow motion, and it may take a couple years. It may take a while. And it's especially the bigger the business, the more velocity behind that train crash. But it is so difficult when you stack bad decisions on top of egos, on top of placating, on top of low standards, on top of office politics, on top of bad metrics or unheld metrics, on top of on. You just end up with what really is akin to gnarled metal, and not able to really untangle that without being like, can I fire everybody? Because that's,
Wipe that off,
at this
start
point,
again.
we just kind of like need to sweep away the wreckage and start over, right? But we know that in our businesses, we can't do that. We can't just be like, oh, y'all, bye. And especially if it's you that's created that issue. So again, having that awareness as well as self-compassion, knowing that yes, this may be in whatever state it is now, but it is salvageable. Everything is figure outable and we can get to another place. That is the next thing I look for. Like I said, owner's mindset. What is the culture you've created? Do we have an overly nice culture? A lot of those overly nice cultures, you start to see office politics coming up. You start to see a lot of passive aggressive, and passive aggressive is exhausting. And for a lot of folks, they're like, I don't want to do business anymore because this shit is just exhausting. I can't. I'm tired of dealing with people problems. I'm tired of dealing with this. And you just end up with a business that is beating you to death. And when you start to stack these different things, you can start to have that very ill feeling towards your own business, right? If you have low margins that you're barely hanging on, now you've got infighting within your teams. And then now you've also got this overly fake crap going on inside your business. It makes it really difficult. Those are the first places that I tend to look. Then, if we've at least met some of those hurdles or identified that those are hurdles in the business, then I also look at where are we in terms of metrics and are we measuring anything? Because rule number one, you cannot manage or what you don't measure. And if you're not measuring things consistently or accurately, you're going to end up with really crappy metrics, very confusing metrics. Also, if you don't have what I call nested metrics, meaning like they cascade down in a very logical order. And I'm actually working on an article about this exact thing now, is how to do those nested metrics. So definitely be on the lookout for our content on this piece. But if you don't have nested metrics, it makes room in your business for more infighting. And
Can you give an
that's when you
example
get
of a
kind of the
nested
worst
metric?
kind, because everybody thinks, absolutely. So a nested metric might be in terms of distribution, right? Say you have large parcel and small parcel. This would be for a former employer of mine. So you have large parcel and small parcel. Then under your nested under large parcel would be all of your distribution warehouses, right? For first mile, second mile, third mile. Then under first mile, nested under that is all of those locations. And so on down the line, so that you can see exactly which warehouse is causing some of the problems, or multiple warehouses that may have problems that are leading up to your overall delay numbers. Is that helpful?
Yes. It's like I do in accounting when you're doing the books, the more specific you can
Yay.
get, the better the report can be.
Yep. 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 Exactly. Same in your operation. Also, if those metrics are not nested, then leaders, and you may be the only person in your business, you may have multiple leaders in your business. But if you're not aligned on what those metrics are, it leaves room for the leaders to pick their favorite. And I've had, keeping with the warehousing story, an example, I've seen where one party had a metric that they really cared about as far as dwell time on the warehouse floor. And I've had another party where they really cared about customer satisfaction. And those two were in direct conflict with one another because this was delivering a couch. It was a very large parcel item, something that the customer would customarily take off to come receive. This was pre-COVID, before you could just do everything from home. But you have folks trying to get things out of their warehouse early, right? So they're like, ship it on Wednesday. They are not going to be home. Lisa in Kentucky is not going to be home until Friday. And so now her couch has been left out in the rain and she is 7 kinds of pissed about it. So while you did get the couch off your floor and your dwell time goes down, your NPS customer net promoter score and their happiness goes down also. So you have those two things in direct conflict with one another, and that is also going to create issues within your business that are going to limit your ability to grow. Then the fifth thing that I look for is your decision velocity. Decision velocity is huge. Are people, again, this kind of comes back to owner mindset and how you've weighed things out, but are you telling folks what to do? Again, a lot of people tend not to do that because they don't want to be labeled a micromanager, toxic boss, any of that shit. But if you're waiting for people to do things and you haven't told them, or they're waiting for things to be told to be what to do and they haven't told you they need the instruction, then you're at this weird standoff and you're not actually getting anything done. And so you can typically see that a lot of that tends to come out in frustration when you talk to your employees or when you talk to folks actually on their front line, things like that. Oh, we asked for that 6 months ago. And then the boss is, I had no idea you were talking about. Or I just can't get anybody to work. I don't know why they won't get anything done. Have you told them they need to do that?
Yeah.
It seems like fairly common sense, but businesses can get so twisted around so fast if you're not actually managing and communicating and making sure that if you have a decision, you move out. And then the last thing I'll say is when you start to have a lot of those issues with an overly nice culture, your politics, your decision velocity being low, all these things start to stack on top of each other. You end up with probably the worst cherry on top that there could be. And that's when your employees start to demand more benefits, more pay, more etc. And yes, we all want to keep up with inflation. We all want to be paid fairly for the work that we're going to do. But we also have to get back at people that treat us like shit. So that's what it comes to, is employees essentially don't have any other recourse other than to up the benefits. Why don't I have a bonus? Why don't I have this? Why don't I? You end up with a lot of this attempt to create leverage against your employer because there really is no other recourse for the crappy operation you have to endure every
Or
day.
you lose great key people, right? Because they don't want to deal with it. Couldn't that
Yes.
happen too?
Exactly. Yep, absolutely. So you start to see your top performers leaving, like you just mentioned, absolutely. And you start to see higher turnover. And then you also start to see greater demand for people that are staying to do that work. And again, employees, yes, everybody wants to be paid fairly, but you tend to get that like iron fist, like you must do this, and a lot of resistance in very large organizations. This translates to the equivalent of a union or actually in a union and trying to get back at the company because you are forcing the employees to endure such a crappy operation that they have no choice but to band together to demand more from you.
Very interesting.
So
So those are like key things that our listeners can try to see if it's occurring in their business. Are they getting their more and more demands from their employees who seem to be more and more disgruntled? It's probably lack of good operation. Are they having a hard time keeping great people? They're like, oh, I love this person, they left, and I love that person, and they left. How is that going on? And then are they surrounding themselves with too many yes people? And that could cause, just like you said, they're not having real discussions. They're not having real improvement. And what is there? I've had many experiences with owners that are like more bottlenecked than what you're saying, where everything had to go through them, and it's just like nobody could get any work done because the owner had to check everything, and it's you are causing a horrible work environment. You hired these people to do their job. Gotta let them. But very, very interesting.
it creates a really low trust environment where, like you said, if the owner has to check every single thing when you are keeping people from growing, and this is actually, I'm glad that you brought this up, because one thing I left out is this really comes down to the law of lids, right? John Maxwell talks all about the law of lids. And so you can't actually have somebody that's working for you that has a higher scale than your lid for operations, for leadership, and for belief in how big the business can be. And I've definitely been there before where I wanted to blow this business up to hundreds of millions of dollars. And the owner was like, oh, we just want to survive at 3 or 4 million. And you end up with a ton of conflict because my belief lid was higher than theirs in terms of how big the business could be. Similarly, if you have, like you're talking about, if the operations lid of the employees is higher than the owner, you're going to end up with that constant conflict of, we are trying to get things done and you are a bottleneck and you will not allow anything to go forward. That also creates mistrust and feelings like, why am I not a part of the team? But it also slows everything down because nothing, and like you said in the last episode, it makes it very hard to sell your business if you're the linchpin.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you mentioned the 5 things that you look at, or 6 things. Sorry, I stopped counting. I apologize. Can you give us one tip?
I probably got carried away and added a few.
Can you give us a tip of what you would do to help improve? So pick one, whichever one you like most, and give an example of like how you would fix it. So for to understand, like you mentioned the issue with the couch going too early. What would you do to fix it? I'm saying you have to use that one. What would you then recommend to fix it?
Sure. In terms of coming in, and if all of the say all six of these things were wrong, all hotspots are
We're
glowing like
here for
crazy, right?
you. No judgment.
If I was gonna do yes, exactly, no judgment. And if you're like I said, if you're listening and you're like, oh shit, I got all those and more, that's okay. Again, that's okay. We are doing the very best we can with the information we know how, and here we want to give you additional information. And if I were to come into a business like this, which I have many times, is first and foremost, I would set new pricing. I would actually do two things. I would set new pricing and I would make every single person, unless it's illegal to do so, based on their credentials, I would make every single person universally commission eligible. Because if you have low margins and then you're fighting all this other crap, it's very difficult. If you are at least starting to raise and bring more money, get a cash infusion into your business, then you can float and sustain yourself until you untangle some of these other things. But if you've got everything stacked and stacked on top of itself, you can have a great culture. If you still have 10% margin, you're all screwed anyway. So you want to immediately bring the level of cash up and the level of help with your cash. But it's when you not only are going to raise your price to an appropriate level, again, aligned with value, and then making all of your employees, literally your secretary, your back of the house, unless it is illegal per a certification that they have or some other credential designation, every single person being commission eligible, because they say we're only 6 degrees from Kevin Bacon, right? So everybody knows somebody, especially they start to know them and remember and recall people a lot better when there's money attached to it.
It's a great
So
incentive.
your own employees, exactly, your own employees, that puts them in charge of their own salary. They're going to work harder on that, right? That puts them in charge of who they get to talk to about the business, and your employees are your greatest marketing tool possible. So if you had, say you only have 4, that's 4 more people speaking amazingness into and about your business. And that's going to be better than nearly any Yelp review out there, because they're in it every day. And if they're still like, this is the jam, you should buy the product, then that is a huge win for you. So the very first thing, like you're saying, is I would go in and I would make sure that we're getting a cash infusion. And then the second thing I would do is see because a lot of your decision velocity stuff tends to happen around launch of new products or services, like we can't make a decision on to move out on something, or actually making a decision on cost containment or investment on how we're going to fix the business in some fashion. So those are probably the very first 2 things that I would start to tackle. Once you can get some of those decision velocity pieces unlocked and can let people move out faster, again, you're not the bottleneck on everything, then you can start to see some of the natural decrease in the others. And then you can take your time a little bit more on managing the metrics and things like that. But again, yeah, first and foremost, in terms of just like triage, the patient is bleeding kind of thing, is I would say bring money in, make sure that everybody can bring money into your business, and then see where it is that we're not moving out on stuff.
Fantastic. Awesome. So this episode, I think we went over a lot of things. We went over owner mindset. We went over setting prices at value. We went over the importance of having real discussions, being open-minded and willing to hear some of those hard truths, which can be blurred or diluted in overly nice work environments, right? Because everybody wants to be everybody's friend. Everybody wants to say yes to the boss or whatever. But what is it? Sometimes tough love, like the person that really cares about you is the one that's going to tell you. Oh, which reminds me of something that you had said before about if it's family, it could be
Yeah.
dysfunctional. And then
Yeah.
we talked about the law of the lid. I think we went over a lot of different things that people listening will be like, yeah, that's me. Yeah, that's me. If anybody did and wants to ask some additional questions, you can find more information, Danielle said, on our website. She's going to be posting a blog very soon. But also, you can reach out to us and find out how we can support you and help you move your business into the direction that you want it to go. So, Danielle, what is our next episode going to be about? Give us a little teaser for what's coming next.
Sure. Our next episode is going to be unlocking the art of unlocking hidden revenue. So here I want to talk about, just like we talked about cash infusion, there's also some creative ways that we can add additional money to the business. So we'll definitely dive into that next week. And again, I really want to stress before we go that no matter where you are in your business, no matter where you are in your financial journey, no matter where you are in like, oh my gosh, I have made a mess of things, that there is no shame. The worst thing you can do is keep doing what you're doing that's not working. And asking for help is the next best thing that you can do. And understanding that, like, okay, I may not have known everything. I may be swimming in this. I may be looking at, oh my gosh, I have to exit this business for $3 million and I'm barely, again, hanging on with my fingernails or losing money. And it can all be turned around. It just takes patience and humility, and set the shame aside and be willing to move forward with people that will support you.
Great words to
So
end on.
there's my "you're okay, we got you" spiel. And we will talk to you next week. Talk soon. Bye.
Bye.